Admiral Susan White stood at the large window of her office on Luna Base, looking at the blue planet Earth below. The stars shone brightly against the black of space. Her gray uniform fit perfectly, showing the 4 gold stars of her rank. She took a sip of coffee from her mug that said, "Don't panic," in big letters. A soft beep came from her desk. "Admiral, we have a problem," said the voice of her aide, Lieutenant Sam Harris. "When don't we have problems, Sam?" she asked with a small smile. "This one's different, ma'am. We've picked up a large fleet entering the outer solar system. They're..." Not responding to standard greeting, Susan's smile dropped. "I'll be right there." 5 minutes later, she walked into the Fleet Command Center. Dozens of officers worked at screens showing maps of space and lists of numbers. In the middle of the room was a large table that showed a 3D map of the solar system. Commander Alan Pierce, her second in command, stood at the table. His usually calm face looked worried. "Admiral on deck," he called, and everyone stood at attention. "At ease," Susan said. "Show me what we've got." Alan pointed to a cluster of red dots moving slowly through the space near Neptune. 57. "Ships, ma'am, biggest fleet we've ever seen, not responding to any messages." "Have we identified them?" Susan asked. "Yes. They're Calaxian." The room went quiet. Everyone had heard of the Calaxians, the most powerful empire in the known galaxy. They had conquered 12 systems in the last 20 years. Earth had managed to stay off their radar until now. "They just sent this message," Alan said, tapping a button on the table. A hologram appeared above the table. It showed a tall, thin alien with gray-blue skin, large black eyes, and no hair. It wore a uniform covered in medals and symbols. "People of Earth," the alien said in a deep voice. "I am Grand Marshal Zexthar of the Calaxian Empire. Your primitive planet has been noticed by our glorious Emperor. You will surrender immediately and join our empire as servants. You have 72 Earth hours to lower all defenses and prepare for our arrival. If you refuse, we will destroy your entire species. Your pathetic ships and weapons cannot stand against our superior technology. This is the only warning you will receive." The message ended. The room stayed quiet. "Well," Susan said, finally. "He seems friendly." A few nervous laughs broke the tension. "Call the United Earth Council," Susan ordered. "I need to speak with them right away." 2 hours later, Susan stood in a large meeting room. The 12 members of the Earth Council sat around a circular table, their faces showing different levels of fear. "They'll crush us," said Counselor Bill Evans, slamming his fist on the table. "The Calaxians have energy weapons we can't even understand. Their shields can block any missile we have." "That's according to our intelligence," Susan said calmly. "But we have a few tricks they don't know about." "What tricks could possibly help against an empire that controls 12 star systems?" asked Counselor Maria Jones. Susan shared a quick look with Alan, who stood behind her. "Let's just say we've been preparing for this day." "You mean Project Chuckle?" asked Counselor Dan Ford, his eyebrows raised. Susan nodded. "It's ready for testing." "That's just a theory," Bill shouted. "We should surrender now and save lives." Calaxians don't take peaceful servants," Susan said firmly. "They take slaves, they destroy cultures. I'm not letting that happen to Earth." "What do you suggest, Admiral?" asked the Council President Ellen Wright. "Let me take the fleet out to meet them," Susan said. "But not to fight, not in the way they expect." "You're going to use Project Chuckle?" Ellen asked. Susan nodded. "The Calaxians have never faced humans before. They don't understand us, and that will be their biggest mistake." "The vote is 6-6, Ellen said after a quick count. "As president, I break the tie. Admiral White, you have permission to deploy the fleet." As Susan and Alan walked back to command, he asked quietly, "Do you really think this will work?" Susan smiled. "The Calaxians expect us to either surrender or fight conventionally. They've never faced an enemy who laughs in the face of death. Let's see how they handle a joke." Dr. Olivia Grant wiped sweat from her forehead as she adjusted settings on a large metal device. The secret lab deep inside Mars Base Alpha hummed with energy. Screens on the wall showed waves and patterns in different colors, 5 other scientists worked at other stations, all looking tired but excited. "Try frequency 7.3, Olivia said to her assistant, Greg Powell. Greg typed commands into his tablet. The waves on the main screen changed shape, becoming smoother with occasional spikes. "Better," Olivia said. "Let's test it." She pressed a button on her desk. "Send in the volunteers." A door slid open and 4 Marines in uniform walked in. They stood at attention, looking serious and professional. "At ease," Olivia said. "This is the 5th test of Project Chuckle. You've all signed the forms. We're testing how different frequencies affect human brains compared to alien ones." The Marines nodded. They had done this before. "Stand on the marked spots," Greg told them. "We'll start at low power." The 4 Marines moved to stand on circles marked on the floor. Olivia adjusted some controls and then looked at Greg. "Ready?" "Ready," he confirmed. Olivia pressed a blue button. The device hummed louder. Nothing seemed to happen for a few seconds. Then one of the Marines, Sergeant Joe Carter, snorted. He quickly covered his mouth, looking embarrassed. Next to him, Private Lisa Brown's shoulders started shaking. She bit her lip, trying not to laugh. "Power to 20%, Olivia said. Greg turned a dial. The humming changed pitch. All 4 Marines were now fighting not to laugh. Joe was bent over, his hands on his knees. Lisa had tears in her eyes. The other 2 were holding on to each other for support. Please stop," Joe managed to say between laughs. "It's too much." Olivia immediately shut down the device. The Marines kept laughing for another minute before they slowly calmed down. "That was too intense," Lisa said, wiping tears from her face. It felt like hearing the funniest joke ever, but there was no joke. "Perfect," Olivia said, making notes on her tablet. "And no headache this time?" The Marines all shook their heads. A door opened and Commander Alan Pierce walked in. Everyone stood straighter. "At ease," Alan said. "Dr. Grant, how's our progress?" "Better than expected," Olivia answered. "We've found the perfect frequency. It affects humans, but only mildly. Based on our studies of Calaxian brain patterns, it should hit them 10 times harder." Alan looked at the Marines, who were still smiling. "Any side effects?" "Just temporary," Joe said. "It feels good, actually, like watching a really funny movie." Alan nodded. "The Calaxians have never developed humor like humans have. Their culture is all about power and order. They don't even have comedy in their entertainment." "That's why this works," Olivia explained. "Their brains aren't used to the chemicals released during laughter. When hit with these frequencies, their neural pathways get overloaded." "The best part," Greg added, "is that our tests show it only affects their ability to fight. It doesn't hurt them permanently." Alan walked to a window that looked out over the red Martian landscape. "Admiral White is stalling for time. The Earth Council is divided. Half want to surrender." "We'll be ready," Olivia promised. "We've modified the communication arrays on all major ships. Once in position, they can broadcast the chuckle frequency across the entire Calaxian fleet." Alan turned back to face them. "Can we weaponize it? Make it stronger?" Olivia shook her head. "That's not the point. We don't want to hurt them. We want to show them that they don't understand humans at all." "Laughter as a defense, not a weapon," Alan said slowly. "Exactly," Olivia agreed. "The Calaxians think in terms of power, strength, conquest. They've never faced an enemy who responds to threats with laughter." Alan smiled. "Admiral White was right. This is our best chance." "Tell her we'll be ready in 12 hours, Olivia said. "Project Chuckle is go for deployment." As Alan left the room, the scientists returned to their work with new energy. Outside, the first ships of Earth's fleet were already leaving orbit, heading to meet the Calaxian Armada. Admiral Susan White looked around the large meeting room aboard her flagship, the USS Defiant. 8 officers sat at the round table, each chosen for their creative thinking. "We have less than 60 hours before the Calaxians expect our surrender," Susan said. "I've called you here because you think differently. We need unusual ideas." Captain Frank Rodriguez leaned forward. He was known for strange but effective battle plans. "The Calaxians expect us to be scared. What if we're not?" "Explain," Susan said. Frank pulled up a hologram showing the Galaxian fleet. They'll come in formation expecting us to either attack head-on or run away. What if we do neither? What if we act bored? Lieutenant Kate Murphy, who studied how minds work during war, nodded. The Galaxians are proud. They expect fear and respect. If we don't show it, they'll be confused and angry. And angry enemies make mistakes, Commander Allen added. But we need to do more than make them angry, Susan said. Dr. Grant's team has Project Chuckle ready, but we need to get close enough to use it. Frank moved his hands through the hologram, making the ship icons move. What if we arrange our ships like this? It looks random, even silly, but actually puts us in perfect position to surround them. The others studied the pattern. It seemed chaotic at first, but then they saw the cleverness in it. And we change all communication channels to broadcast old comedy shows, Kate suggested. When they try to talk to us, all they'll hear is laughing. We could eat popcorn on camera during their threats, said Lieutenant Roy Baker with a small smile. Susan tapped her fingers on the table. This is good, but we need more. What about our weapons? Don't use them, Frank said immediately. Not at first. The Galaxians expect us to fire everything we have and fail. Let's surprise them by not even trying. It will drive them crazy, Kate agreed. Their whole culture is based on showing power. If we act like they're not worth our effort, they'll be furious. And when they get close enough, Allen said, we hit them with Project Chuckle. The group spent the next 3 hours planning every detail. Susan felt more hopeful with each minute. These officers understood something the Galaxians didn't. Humans were different from any species the Empire had ever conquered. After the meeting, Susan walked with Allen to the bridge. Do you think it will work? Allen asked quietly. Project Chuckle works on the Galaxian brain. That's science, Susan replied. The rest is psychology. Can we make them angry enough to make mistakes? I think so. The Earth Council is worried. Half of them still want to surrender. Susan stopped walking and faced Allen. In 300 years of space travel, humans have never surrendered to anyone. We've faced stronger enemies before. We survived because we don't think like other species. They reached the bridge, a large room with many stations where officers controlled the ship. Through the main window, they could see Earth growing smaller as the fleet moved toward the outer solar system. Send the orders to all ships, Susan told the communication officer. Operation Punchline is now active. On every ship in the human fleet, captains received their unusual orders. Some smiled. Some looked confused, but all of them began preparing. Engineers modified communication systems to broadcast laugh tracks and comedy shows. Weapon officers practiced not firing when attacked. Pilots studied the strange flight patterns they would need to follow. In her private quarters, Susan recorded a message to the Galaxian commander. She sat at her desk, put a bowl of popcorn in front of her, and began eating casually. Record, she said to the computer. Hello, Grand Marshal, whoever you are. I got your message about surrendering. That's really funny. Anyway, we're coming. Out to meet you. Hope you have a sense of humor. End recording. As the message was sent, the human fleet continued moving outward, appearing disorganized and random. But every ship was exactly where it needed to be for the plan to work. The massive Galaxian warships moved slowly past Neptune's orbit. There were 57 of them, each one bigger than the largest human ship. Their dark metal hulls absorbed light rather than reflected it, making them look like moving shadows against the stars. On the bridge of the lead Galaxian ship, Grand Marshal Zexithar stood tall and proud. His blue-gray skin was decorated with markings showing his high rank. Around him, Galaxian officers worked at their stations, all moving with perfect discipline. The human fleet approaches, Grand Marshal, reported Subcommander Vex. They are not in battle formation. Zexithar frowned. Show me. A large screen lit up, showing the approaching human ships. They were smaller and fewer than the Galaxian fleet, and they were scattered. Some moved in circles. Others seemed to drift sideways. There was no formation that made sense. Are their navigation systems damaged? Zexithar asked, confused. Unknown, Grand Marshal. They are ignoring our hails. Zexithar's frown deepened. Send the final warning. Their time is almost up. Across space, on the bridge of the USS Defiant, Admiral Susan White sat in her command chair. She was eating popcorn from a large bowl and watching an old comedy show on a small screen. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Parker from the communication station, "the Calaxians are hailing us." Susan sighed and put her popcorn aside. "Put them on screen, but keep the show playing in the corner, though Main screen changed to show Grand Marshal Zexthar's stern face. Behind him, his bridge crew looked serious and ready for battle. "Human leader," Zexthar said in a formal tone, "your time to surrender is nearly complete. Lower your defenses and prepare to be boarded." Susan looked confused. She turned to Commander Alan. "Is this the pizza delivery? I ordered pepperoni." Alan shook his head, playing along. "No, Admiral, I think it's those alien salespeople again." Susan turned back to the screen. "Sorry, we're not interested in whatever you're selling. We already have a vacuum cleaner." Zexithar's face showed shock, then anger. "This is not a sales communication. I am Grand Marshal Zexthar of the Calaxian Empire. We are here to conquer your planet." Susan took another handful of popcorn. "The Who Empire? Sorry, there are so many little empires out here these days. We can't keep track." "The Calaxian Empire." Zexthar's voice rose. "The most powerful force in the galaxy." "Oh, right." Susan nodded. "You're the ones with the funny hats at the Galactic Festival last year?" The Calaxian's face turned a darker blue with rage. "Our fleet will destroy your pathetic ships. You will show proper fear and respect." Susan yawned. "Look, we're kind of busy with movie night. Can you come back next week?" With a growl of anger, Zexithar cut the communication. Susan immediately sat up straight, her casual manner gone. "Status report," she ordered. "The Calaxians are powering up weapons," reported the tactical officer. "Their lead ships are moving to attack position." "All ships, execute maneuver laugh track," Susan commanded. Across the human fleet, ships began moving in what appeared to be random patterns. But each movement was carefully planned to bring them into position for Project Chuckle. On the Calaxian bridge, Zexthar was still fuming. "They mock us. The humans must be taught respect. Target their lead ship and fire." Bright beams of energy shot from the Calaxian vessels toward the human fleet. Most of the shots missed as the human ships continued their strange movements. Those that hit seemed to do little damage as the ships had reinforced their shields in key areas. "The humans are broadcasting something on all frequencies," reported the Calaxian communication officer. "What is it? Begging for mercy?" Zexthar asked. "No, Grand Marshal. It seems to be entertainment programs. Shows where humans laugh at each other falling down or telling jokes." Zexthar slammed his fist on a console. "They insult us with their primitive humor. All ships, advance and prepare boarding parties. We will take their ships and teach them the proper way to face defeat." As the Calaxian fleet moved forward, Susan watched on her screen. She nodded to Alan. "They've taken the bait," she said quietly. "All ships prepare for Phase 2 of Operation Punchline. Stand by to activate Project Chuckle on my mark." On the bridge of the Calaxian command ship, Grand Marshal Zexthar was about to give the order for final attack when something strange happened. One of his officers made a sound he had never heard before. Zexthar turned to see Sub-Commander Vex with his hand over his mouth. The sound came again, a strange huffing noise. "Sub-Commander, are you malfunctioning?" Zexithar demanded. Vex tried to stand at attention, but his shoulders were shaking. "No, Grand Marshal, I feel strange." Another officer made the same noise. Then another. Soon half the bridge crew was making the strange sounds. "What is happening?" Zexthar shouted. The communication officer looked up from her station, her face twitching. "Something is coming through on all frequencies. Our filters can't block it." Zexthar felt it then, a strange tickling in his mind, a bubbling feeling in his chest. His face muscles wanted to move in an unfamiliar way. "Shut down all communications," he ordered, but it was too late. The feeling grew stronger. Zexthar's mouth twitched upward at the corners. A strange sound escaped his throat. He was laughing. The proud Grand Marshal of the Calaxian Empire was laughing uncontrollably. All across the Calaxian fleet the same thing was happening. Crews doubled over at their stations. Officers rolled on the floor. Some Calaxians laughed so hard that tears streamed from their eyes, something that had never happened in their culture before. On the USS Defiant, Admiral Susan watched the sensor readings with satisfaction. "Project Chuckle is working," Lieutenant Kate reported. "Calaxian communications are filled with, well, laughter. Their weapon systems are powering down," Commander Allen added. "Their ships are drifting." Susan nodded. "The Calaxian ships are neural linked to their crews. When the operators can't focus, the systems shut down." "Should we move in and capture their ships?" asked the tactical officer. Susan shook her head. "No. We're not here to humiliate them, just to show them we can't be conquered. Keep broadcasting until I give the order to stop." On the USS Liberty, Captain Frank watched his screens with amazement. "It actually worked," he said softly. Linda checked her readings. "All Calaxian weapons are offline. They're completely vulnerable. But we're not attacking," Frank said firmly. "Those are our orders." In her lab on Mars, Dr. Olivia Grant monitored the signals from the fleet. The data showed exactly what she had hoped. The frequency was affecting the Calaxians strongly, but causing no permanent damage. Their brains were simply experiencing joy for perhaps the first time. "I think we can start to reduce the power," she told her team. They've had enough. Back on the Calaxian command ship, Zexthar had slid from his chair to the floor. He had been laughing for nearly 10 minutes. His face hurt. His stomach muscles ached. And yet, underneath the discomfort, was a strange feeling. It felt good. Slowly, the intensity of the sensation began to decrease. The humans were reducing the power of their strange weapon. Zexthar managed to pull himself up and look around his bridge. His proud, disciplined crew was in disarray. Some were still giggling. Others looked shocked at their own behavior. "Status report," Zexthar said, trying to sound commanding despite the occasional chuckle that still escaped his lips. "Our weapons are offline," reported an officer. "All ships report the same condition." Zexthar realized the terrible truth. The humans could have destroyed his entire fleet. Instead, they had chosen this strange attack that harmed no one. "The human flagship is hailing us," said the communication officer. Zexthar straightened his uniform, trying to regain some dignity. On screen, Admiral Susan White appeared on the main screen. She wasn't laughing or mocking. Her face was serious, but not unkind. "Grand Marshal," she said, "I think it's time we talked. Really talked." Zexthar felt another chuckle rise in his throat, but he suppressed it. "You have defeated us without firing a shot. How is this possible?" Susan smiled slightly. "There's a lot about humans you don't understand. Maybe it's time you learned." For the first time in his long military career, Zexthar considered the possibility that conquest wasn't the only way forward. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is time for talking." 6 hours after Project Chuckle was activated, Grand Marshal Zexthar sat across from Admiral Susan White in the meeting room of the USS Defiant. The effects of the laughter frequency had worn off, but the experience had changed the Calaxian commander. His posture was still straight, but less rigid. His eyes showed curiosity instead of just pride. 2 human guards stood by the door. 2 Calaxian officers stood behind their leader. Commander Allen stood behind Susan. "Your weapon," Zexthar said. "It caused no permanent damage." "It wasn't designed to harm," Susan replied, "just to disrupt. But you could have destroyed our fleet while we were incapacitated." The Calaxian seemed genuinely confused. "Why didn't you?" "That's not our way," Susan said simply. "Humans don't want conquest. We just want to live in peace, explore, and trade." Zexthar's face showed disbelief. "All species seek power. It is the way of the universe." "Not all species," Susan corrected. "Humans learned long ago that cooperation often works better than conquest. The Calaxian was quiet for a moment. The feeling your weapon caused, it was not unpleasant once the surprise passed. Laughter, Susan explained. It's an important part of human culture. It helps us deal with stress, build bonds, and stay mentally healthy. Calaxians do not laugh, Zexthar said. At least we didn't until today. Dr. Olivia Grant, who had been brought up from Mars for the meeting, spoke up. Your brain scans show that your species has the physical ability to experience humor and laughter. Your culture simply never developed it. Zexthar turned to the human scientist. How did you discover this weakness in our species? Olivia shook her head. It's not a weakness, it's an undeveloped strength. And we found it by studying many species throughout the galaxy. Humans aren't the strongest or fastest, but we understand emotions better than most. The meeting continued for hours. Zexthar learned about human history, how they had survived despite not being the strongest species. Susan learned about the Calaxian Empire, its strict hierarchy and its focus on power and order. When the talks finished for the day, Zexthar returned to his ship. Susan walked with Commander Allen to her office. Do you think they'll honor any agreement we make? Allen asked. Susan considered the question. I think they will. The experience changed them. You saw how confused they were that we didn't attack when we had the chance. They don't understand mercy, Allen said. They didn't, Susan corrected. But they're learning. The next morning, Zexthar returned with a formal proposal. The Calaxian Empire would leave Earth alone. In exchange, humans would share their understanding of emotions, especially humor. The Emperor was affected by my report, Zexthar explained. He seemed uncomfortable. When I described the sensation of laughter, he became very interested. Susan hid her smile. We're happy to share our culture with yours. There is one more thing, the Calaxian said. I would like to see this comedy that you broadcast during the battle. Susan blinked in surprise, then nodded. Of course. That afternoon, a strange scene played out in the USS Defiance recreation room. 20 Calaxian officers sat stiffly in chairs, watching classic human comedy shows. At first, they didn't react. Then one officer made a small huffing sound at a funny scene. Another joined in. Soon, the room filled with awkward Calaxian laughter. Watching from the back, Susan leaned toward Dr. Grant. I never thought we'd win a war with I Love Lucy reruns. Olivia smiled. The best weapon was one they didn't even know they were vulnerable to. Joy. As the Calaxians continued watching, their laughter became more natural. For the first time in their long history, they were experiencing humor without the artificial stimulation of Project Chuckle. We should prepare a collection of comedy to send back with them, Susan suggested. Already done, Olivia replied. Everything from Charlie Chaplin to modern comedians. It might just change their entire culture. Susan watched the laughing aliens with satisfaction. Sometimes the best defense isn't a bigger gun. It's something the enemy doesn't even think to defend against. 6 months after the day humans defeated the Calaxian Empire with laughter, the Great Hall of the Earth Council buzzed with excitement. Delegates from 12 species filled the room, including 6 Calaxians in their formal uniforms. The event was historic. The signing of the first peace treaty between Earth and the Calaxian Empire. Admiral Susan White, now wearing her formal, white uniform with all her medals, stood to the side with Commander Allen and Dr. Olivia Grant. I still can't believe how much they've changed, Allen said quietly, watching the Calaxian delegates chatting with other species. Laughter changes everything, Olivia replied. Their brain scans show they've developed new neural pathways. Their entire society is evolving. The lead Calaxian delegate was no longer Grand Marshal Zexthar, but Ambassador Zexthar. He had given up his military rank to become his empire's first diplomat. As the signing ceremony ended, a reception began. Humans and aliens mingled, sharing food and conversation. Zexthar approached Susan's group. Admiral White, he said with a small bow. Dr. Grant, Commander Allen, it is good to see you again. Ambassador, Susan greeted him. How are things in the Empire? Changing, Zexthar said. His voice had lost some of its stiffness. The comedy archives you sent have spread throughout our worlds. Some traditionalists resist, but most citizens are embracing this new experience. And the Emperor? Olivia asked. Zexthar's face twitched in what was almost a smile. He watches human comedies every day. He has ordered comedy theaters built on every Calaxian world. Susan hid her amusement. I'm glad he's enjoying our culture. It is more than enjoyment, Zexthar said seriously. It is transformation. For thousands of years, our species valued only power and order. Now we are learning flexibility, creativity, joy. And how are you finding it personally? Olivia asked. This time, Zexthar did smile, a real smile that looked only slightly uncomfortable on his alien face. I have become what my people call a humor expert. I study human comedy and teach my people its value. Alan looked surprised. You? The same commander who threatened to destroy Earth? That seems like a different person now, Zexthar admitted. After experiencing laughter, I could not return to my old ways of thinking. As they talked, a human waiter accidentally bumped into a Calaxian delegate, spilling a drink. In the past, such an insult might have started a war. Instead, the Calaxian made a huffing sound, their version of a chuckle, and helped clean up the mess. Zexthar nodded with satisfaction. 6 months ago, that Calaxian would have demanded the waiter's execution. Now he sees the humor in the situation. It's remarkable, Susan said honestly. There is something I must tell you, Zexthar said, his tone more serious. The Emperor has issued a new directive to all Imperial forces. He paused. It says, beware the species that laughs when faced with destruction. They are either insane or possess power beyond your comprehension. In the case of humans, it appears to be both. Susan laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one, Zexthar assured her, and as a warning to any who would threaten Earth again. Later, as the reception continued, Susan stood with Olivia by a large window overlooking the city lights below. You know what's funny? Susan said. We spent decades building bigger weapons, stronger shields, faster ships, all to defend Earth, but in the end our best defense was something we've had all along. The ability to laugh, Olivia agreed. Not just laugh, Susan corrected her. The ability to see humor even in dangerous situations, to respond to threats in unexpected ways, to be human. From across the room, they heard the unmistakable sound of Calaxian laughter as Zexthar attempted to tell a joke to a group of diplomats. It wasn't a very good joke, and his timing needed work, but the effort itself was revolutionary. I never thought I'd say this, Olivia said, but I think the Calaxians might become our strongest allies. Because we share technology? Susan asked. No, Olivia shook her head. Because we've shared laughter. And that creates a stronger bond than any treaty or trade agreement. Susan watched the room full of different species talking, eating, and laughing together. What had begun as a dangerous confrontation had transformed into something wonderful, understanding between different worlds. The next time someone challenges the human fleet, Susan said with a smile, maybe we should just invite them to dinner and a comedy show instead of preparing for battle. It might just work, Olivia agreed. After all, laughter truly is universal.